A Californian deciphers the riddle of Marquez's unspoken struggle. The helm of Ducati has uttered what the entire paddock lacked the audacity to voice. Marc Marquez is far from whole, and the forensic trail leads straight back to a winter draped in muteness. A fractured shoulder, a machine unaware it is cradling a sovereign. No one announces when a champion begins to wither. There is no grand proclamation, no polished communique. The essence merely drains away gradually, lap after aching lap, apex after trembling apex, while the masses observe and fabricate alibis. But in April of 2026, Claudio Domenicali, the emperor of Ducati, one of motorsport's most formidable sovereigns, ceased manufacturing excuses. He seized veracity like a blade and brandished it before the world. Marc Marquez, reigning MotoGP titan, seven-time conqueror of this merciless arena, is not intact. And the origin traces backward to a season of cold where he was abandoned to his anguish, incapable of riding, incapable of testing, incapable of arming himself. The hush of that winter now shrieks at 300 kilometers per hour. The initial wound, rewind to Indonesia 2025, opening lap of the Mandalika contest, curve 7. Marco Bezzecchi, astride his factory Aprilia, miscalculated the velocity differential and slammed Marquez to the tarmac. What appeared in that fleeting instant, as a routine racing collision metamorphosed into something far more sinister beneath the glare of surgical lamps. The coracoid process in Marquez's right shoulder shattered, ligaments were torn. Immediate surgery became unavoidable, but the procedure unveiled a discovery that froze the paddock's blood. The metal anchors inserted into Marquez's right arm back in 2020, following that catastrophic Honda crash at Jerez that nearly erased his career, had warped. 4 years of racing upon a fractured foundation. 4 years of enduring torment that should have subdued any lesser soul before the engine ever ignited. The surgeons remedied both afflictions, yet repairing the hardware does not exorcise the phantom within the chassis. The winter that exacted everything. While Bezzecchi was already lapping on his Aprilia, accumulating telemetry, forging rapport with a machine evolving beneath him at every session, Marc Marquez remained confined to a rehabilitation chamber, his arm immobilized, witnessing the GP26 take form without his fingerprints upon it. He forfeited the entire postseason evaluation in Valencia. He missed every winter test. Each circuit another rider completed on that bike, Marc was absent. Each dataset Ducati harvested, each developmental upgrade they executed, each tire cycle they explored, he was nowhere. In MotoGP, data equates to oxygen. You cannot inhale on race day if you were absent when the atmosphere was being concocted. Marquez arrived at 2026 with a physique still mending and a motorcycle he scarcely recognized. That is not preparation, that is warfare devoid of weaponry. Domenicali unleashes the hammer. Everyone in the paddock had been dancing around the truth. Coaches wrapped themselves in diplomacy. Team principals weighed each syllable like gold. The public relations apparatus churned at full throttle. And then Claudio Domenicali, not a rider, not an engineer, but the man who commands the entire Ducati empire, parted his lips and permitted brutal honesty to tumble forth like spent shell casings striking concrete. In an interview with Corriere Romagna, the CEO spoke without ornament. Marquez lost the entire winter. Testing was fractured. The season's commencement suffered. And in the very same breath, delivered in that measured executive cadence that strikes harder than any outburst of rage ever could, Domenicali conceded that his champion is perhaps not even restored to full capacity yet. That single word, perhaps, carries the gravity of an entire championship campaign. He did not declare he will recover, he said perhaps. In Domenicali's vernacular, that is a confession dressed in a tailored suit. Perhaps he isn't even, I think, quite back to 100% yet, but he's unquestionably a rider of extraordinary resolve and incalculable talent. Claudio Domenicali, CEO of Ducati, Corriere Romagna, the man who absorbs every incoming round. Now halt, because this is where the chronicle ceases to be about logistics and transforms into an examination of the rarest breed of human being alive. Every team in this paddock possesses riders who assign blame. They indict the rubber, they indict the configuration, the weather, the directive from the pit wall. That is instinctive, that is human. It is also precisely what Marc Marquez refuses to execute. After Austin, a circuit where he once possessed the asphalt so absolutely that it felt as though the entire state had been christened in his honor, Marquez crossed the finish line in fifth, served a long-lap penalty for a collision with teammate Fabio Di Giannantonio during the sprint, and strode to the microphone. He possessed every conceivable justification to make Ducati perspire. He could have mentioned the GP26's aggression on fresh tires. He could have gestured toward the machine's instability in the opening sector. He could have allowed the question to linger and watch the engineers squirm. Instead, he uttered 8 words that deserve to be carved into stone: I'm missing. Myself is missing, not the bike. 8 words that aimed every firearm in the room directly at his own thorax. That is not fragility. That is the most calculated act of warrior-grade command you will ever witness in a paddock overflowing with competitive egos. When Marquez accepts culpability, he accomplishes 2 maneuvers simultaneously. He shields the machinery, and he incinerates every alibi from beneath his own boots. He leaves himself nowhere to conceal. He stands in the inferno without armor and declares, "Find me when I am prepared." The pressure does not shatter him, it sculpts him. Every crash, every operation, every rehabilitation chamber, every race observed from the periphery, it was not damage, it was architecture. He's being constructed, floor by floor, out of agony that would have terminated anyone else's profession 3 times over. He is not a champion who happens to also be a warrior. He is a warrior first, who learned to triumph because surrender did not exist in the language he was born speaking. 3 races into the season, Thailand, Brazil, Austin, and Marco Bezzecchi has seized every single victory. The same Bezzecchi who placed Marquez on the operating table in Indonesia now leads the championship by 36 lengths. His Aprilia is a completely different species from the machine that once chased Ducati for years. Massimo Rivola at Aprilia insists they have not yet confronted the genuine Marquez. He is correct, but that statement also carries an uncomfortable edge. It implies the authentic Marquez may still be weeks distant, and races do not pause for convalescence. Jorge Martin also sits 32 points ahead of the champion. At Austin, historically one of Marquez's most dominant arenas, 7 wins upon that asphalt, he was outpaced by AI Augura during substantial portions of the race. Augura navigating traffic without the full factory treatment. That is the scope of how drastically this chapter differs on paper. The voices from within the blaze. The analysis emerging from the paddock is anything but gentle. Andrea Dovizioso, who spent 3 years being beaten to world titles by Marquez and knows precisely what the Spaniard resembles at full throttle, has gone on record asserting that the situation is far graver than it appears from the outside. Ramon Forcada, the man who crewed for Jorge Lorenzo through 3 championships and still observes this sport with the keenest eyes in the game, has been even more surgical. He says the body language narrates the story Marquez refuses to speak aloud. The shoulder is not correct. You can perceive it in how he carries himself on the bike. You can perceive it in the manner he is combating the machine rather than directing it. Dani Pedrosa, who knows Marquez better than almost any living soul, says the champion is informing the world that everything is fine, and that is precisely the problem. Marc Marquez at 100% does not offer reassurance. He dominates. Jerez, the reckoning. All pathways in this 2026 narrative converge upon Jerez, the Spanish Grand Prix native soil, a month's respite between Austin and Spain. Every observer in this pattern understands what that window signifies. If Marquez walks into Jerez and still cannot challenge the frontrunners, if Bezzecchi captures a 4th consecutive victory on Spanish territory while the reigning champion watches from the rear, the title conversation becomes brutal arithmetic. 36 points is not a death sentence across 19 remaining rounds. Marquez himself rebounded from a 37-point deficit in 2017 and won the championship by that exact same margin. The mathematics permit miracles, but the shoulder must permit them first. And Jerez is also the circuit where his right arm was shattered in 2020. The same venue, the same limb. The sport does not traffic in coincidence, it traffics in trials. Here is what Claudio Domenicali uttered that no one else dared to voice. The winter fractured the preparation, but it did not fracture the man. That distinction matters enormously. Ducati is not composing eulogies, they are composing recovery protocols. And somewhere within that rehabilitation process, a version of Marc Marquez is being reconstructed that is more enraged, more exacting, and more hazardous than anything Bezzecchi's Aprilia has ever confronted. The man who has undergone surgery on the same arm twice, who raced through torn ligaments, who returned from a bone reconstruction that should have concluded his career at Honda, that man does not calculate his 100% the way you do. His floor is other riders' ceiling. His broken is other people's functional. When he arrives at Jerez, he will not be transporting excuses, he will be transporting everything he has survived: blood, agony, vengeance. The reckoning is approaching.